Hello everyone, my name is Linda Key Jackson and I am the CEO of the Fragrance Foundation here in the UK. And welcome to today's Midday Masterclass. Today's session is all about the power of secondary packaging, and IPL are an award-winning design and producer of packaging, and we'll touch on the challenges you might face in the decision-making process, balancing both innovation and sustainability. Packaging is a key element to any brand, and IPL will share their knowledge and expertise in this session. And so today I am delighted to welcome from IPL, Jason Roberts, Business Development Manager, and LB Udendal, Innovation and Design Manager. And so with their wealth of experience, they will be able to guide you through and ensure you choose the right packaging for your brand. Please add any questions onto the Q&A and they will try and answer as many as possible, but we will also give you their contact details after today's event if you need more advice or understanding. I'm really looking forward to today's session. So a big welcome to Jason and LB.
We really appreciate you having us here today, and a big welcome to obviously the Fragrance Foundation members and also to some of our own clients who we have invited to join us on the session. I think there are about 30 people watching, so hopefully we won't lose too many by the end of it. We'll try to keep it interesting, we'll try to keep it a little bit entertaining, and we'll certainly get through it. And if there's plenty of time left over, we can take lots of question and answer sessions. So a quick introduction to us. IPL, as Lindsay mentioned, is an award-winning designer and producer of premium secondary packaging for clients with luxury brands across the sectors of fragrances and cosmetics, drinks, technology, fashion, watches and jewelry, luxury goods like bags and accessories, and even numismatics, which is coin packaging. We have offices and teams on 5 continents around the world and deliver around 5 million packs annually. We're not a big company. We have less than 100 employees, but we're one of less than a dozen of truly high-end bespoke packaging companies globally. And even perhaps rarer, we are privately owned and have been since the company's formation 21 years ago. I look after IPL's key clients in the UK and mainland Europe. LB is IPL's head of design and innovation. He has a team of 4 designers working below him, and together they produce some of the fabulously created concepts that you'll see on our website and in our e-brochure, the link to which you are welcome to contact me for. So IPL is a proud associate member to the Fragrance Foundation UK, as we think they do a great job in supporting not only the UK fragrance industry, but members elsewhere around the world as well who sell into the UK market. And if you're watching today and would like to inquire about membership, I recommend you contact Linda to find out more about the benefits they provide, one of which is their amazing online fragrance training course, for which IPL is delighted to be sponsoring the boxes for this year. So let's have a little look at what we're going to be going through today. In today's masterclass, LB and I are going to talk about secondary packaging, which, as everybody knows, is not the bottles the fragrance is sold in, that's primary packaging, but the boxes that those bottles go in. Now, on the face of it, this is a very simple product. It's just a box. But dig a little deeper and you'll start to appreciate all of the complexities that secondary packaging brings to a brand story. Its appeal to a customer, and why the importance of a pack that can actually enhance and complement a fragrance can make all the difference to a bottom line. So LB, why don't you tell us more about the wonder of the reveal and of the packaging, and why you think packaging is such an important element as to a fragrance product in itself?
Thank you, Jason. Just to start from the beginning, in my mind, you must always think of secondary packaging firstly as a protective element to secure whatever luxury, in our case, product it holds. But it can be so much more, really. I mean, starting with material choices and the emotions those evoke, color choices, how that gets perceived by different people around the world, combinations of textures, materials, colors, openings. These all add or can subtract from the quality or the perception of the product on shelf. For instance, there's a big difference between how Asian markets perceive specific colors to European markets. One is luxurious, the other one can be seen as fairly negative. The way that people interact with packaging is always important in my mind. The opening experience, the reveal, can it be too much? Is it too little? Today's market as well, people are much more inclined to understand the circumstances around sustainability, where materials are coming from is really important, how we source these things, and also just the excessive use of packaging materials and layers of unnecessary substrates. So there's a lot that goes into getting a pack to be to fulfill all the roles that the client will need, above and beyond the cost, the volumes, the quality expectations. It's just hitting the targets in as much as getting the look and feel right at a certain price for a certain client.
So with all of that said, let's kick off with a contradiction then. Why do famous high street perfume houses not spend more on their packaging? Well, I think in my mind, ironically, it's because they don't need to. Everybody knows them. They're backed by multinationals with massive marketing budgets. I mean, you know, anybody can say, let's spot which celebrities promoting this particular fragrance. Manufacturing and selling mass market fragrances means they don't need anything more than simple card packaging to sell their product. And also the price they're selling at means they're unlikely to either. Anything less than £35, for argument's sake, on a perfume, and it probably doesn't make financial sense to spend more than about 5% on your box. But don't get me wrong, whilst the structure may be simple, there's still loads of money going into what that packaging looks like and what it's trying to do. So arguably high street perfumes are as much, if not more, about clever marketing than they are about fabulous fragrance. But separately, there's a separate side to gifting on the side of packaging, which we'll touch on later. So it all starts for you as a brand, a fragrance owner, for those who are watching, is what do you want your packaging to do? Now, for niche brands, this can create a point of differentiation to attract attention. That's exactly what LB was saying a moment ago. If it's sitting on the same shelf as a well-known brand, however, what sense is there in trying to compete using the same type of box? You're invariably going to be outspent, if not in the final product, then certainly in the design and innovation side of it. And the impact you're hoping to achieve will be lessened as a result. But a slightly different box, however, can catch the customer's eye and draw attention to the brand. Is there anything you'd want to add on to that?
Yeah, I think definitely the interaction with the packaging is one element, but the on-shelf recognizability of a brand, how it compares to the excesses or understatement of a competitive brand on shelf. These things are all important to look at. More iconic brands, like you said, Tiffany, Apple, they've made statements with very understated packaging because their brand is so recognizable and so strong. But they also do a great deal to ensure that that more simple structure is as well made and put together as it can be. So it's not just necessarily letting go of quality or letting go of superficial enhancements on the pack, but really getting the simplicity right, the fit, the feel, the quality of the materials, the way that you interact with that pack, the simplicity of it is important in my mind.
We often see it when you go to the airport is a classic example. You go into the duty free and you look around and you see some of the packs on the shelves, and then you look above and you see packs that are slightly on the higher shelves, and their boxes are always a little bit more premium, and that can make a difference to a fragrance and where it sits in a brand tier. If you're selling cheap and cheerful fragrances, obviously it makes sense that you're going to have boxes that aren't that particularly expensive. But if you're sitting on that cusp between, am I trying to appeal to a mass market, or am I trying to appeal to perhaps the luxury buyer, spending that little bit more on a pack can in often cases take you into the new premium layer, but it comes with it a whole different brand consideration as to exactly where you want your brand to sit. So it takes us to the next question: how much do I spend on my packaging? Now, as we've said, your spend is invariably linked to your desired effect on buyer brand perception. But ironically, in our experience, though, often a brand owner is so focused on making it a great product like a fragrance or a whiskey that the packaging almost comes as an afterthought. And yet for a potential new customer in a shop, it's often the very first thing they see. So wouldn't it make sense then for it to make a great initial impression? The other challenge we often encounter is the reluctance to allocate sufficient budget to a pack because they think, oh, I'm going to make it look fantastic, but I'm not going to spend much money on it. And we ask why? Because looks matter when you're trying to get someone to try a new product. Drinks companies, and we know this because we work with a lot of them, spend more on their packaging percentage-wise than fragrances do. And why? Because in a market that's equally as competitive, they've recognized a long time ago that you can't sell alcohol in a plastic bag. So they put their premium brands in beautiful packs to attract aficionados. And these are new customers we're talking about, not the loyal ones, because they're already loyal to that brand. But then having sold that customer on the quality of the actual product, which is no different from fragrances, it's all about pursuit of excellence and appealing to personal taste. They elevate the customer's perception of the brand through the same fantastic packaging. And I'm going to divert very quickly to a story which is for IPL Packaging specifically, which is one of our clients called Reimagine. And about 18 years ago, Reimagine was a middle of the range brand. And they came to us and they said, we want to change the perception of Reimagine and take it into the next level. And we won't go into too many details, but they spent about 20% more on their packaging. And in so doing, took them out of the middle of the range bracket and ended up increasing their market share by about 18%. So the key here is don't neglect the importance of secondary packaging when thinking about your fragrance, and don't underestimate how much extra perceived value you can create by spending just a little bit more on the outer box. Like a lot of niche brands, you may only want to be able to afford, or can be able to afford, to put it into a relatively simple square off-the-shelf bottle or similar as primary packaging, but you can create magic with a secondary pack. And part of that magic is what we all know is the reveal and the layering that goes into it. LB, tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Like I said before, that initial interaction with a piece of secondary packaging is really what makes or breaks the experience for the end user. It can be a beautiful reveal with an easy to open or very interesting engineered pack with maybe an elaborate fastener or a different type of door, or it can become quite cumbersome where people aren't intuitively interacting with it. You can't necessarily get it open easily enough. Something falls out because it's missized or misshapen, or there's just an excessive layering. I think it can really take, or like I said, make or break your experience as the user with it. Because that initial opening, it sort of builds expectation. The reveal is coming. What's inside? Is there an important piece of information that reveals itself? A booklet, a certificate? Is there a cover card or maybe a fabric pouch? It adds to an element of drama, and it adds value, perceived value, real value, but it also has the potential of putting somebody off of it. So it needs to be considered really. What is the purpose behind layered reveal? What is the purpose behind concealing products with different layers of material, fabric, or inserts? And then does that function? Is it properly engineered? Are the materials well thought out? Do they play off each other in a nice way? Textures, colors, those sorts of things. And I think most importantly, does it promote or enhance the primary pack in some way? Is there a secondary use potentially, or does it have a display functionality, which is something that a lot of people in the perfume and numismatic industry specifically ask us for. So that interaction, that first sort of cracking of the seal, I think must be really considered and can definitely spoil it or really, really enhance it.
So that's a lot of information to process for somebody who came into the business just wanting to make perfumes. So how do you get around this? How do you do this? How do you find somebody who has the experience and the knowledge to be able to create these wonderful secondary packs? And that's where the choice of a supplier that is right for you comes into play. Because the size of your company and the extent of your resources will generally determine which path you follow in this regard. But the end goal is still the same, making sure that what comes out of the box when it arrives at your warehouse or repackaging hub is exactly what you ordered, with the quality you expected, and also delivered on time and in time for your new launch or distributional cycle. So how many times has it happened that a supplier has let you down, which can be a terrible thing? It can really make a difference to your business. So making the right choices early can limit the chances of this happening. And that's hopefully what we're going to try and help you do today. Large organizations, well, they've got different considerations. They generally have their own design teams, or they spend lots of money with brand and design agencies. They often work directly with factories because they have people who can be there and even be on site making sure that the production lines are well maintained, that all the CSR compliance, all the criteria that is desired to make sure that the brand story is on track is met. And so their concerns are centered more on reliable forecasting, supply chain reliability, and effective distribution networks. But for smaller startup brands, there's so much to think about. Right from the beginning, which is, are my expectations realistic when contrasted against the realities of design and manufacture? There are so many things to consider, and a good supplier should be able to provide answers to the following. Let's start. Is design included, or is it going to cost me extra? How will I get the best value for my money? Is it going to be engineered to the point at which I know that the design is going to turn around and say, and Elby, you can speak to this as part of the design process in a moment. Am I going to know that the money I'm spending is all going to get sucked into the design element, or is it going to be included in the pack? Am I spending enough to get what I want? Am I going to spend too little or budget too little and somehow turn around and go, oh, actually, the pack I want to make is way more than I thought it was going to be. So I'm going to have to scale back my expectations. Then there are the practicalities of manufacturing. For example, factory MOQs. It's great if you want to do a box of 100, but will you be able to find a factory who will be able to do that? Would you consider maybe spending that much more, buying in 2 years worth of supply of packaging, because that'll give you the economies of scale, which will actually end up spending less per pack once you factored in all the other setup costs and overheads and raw materials that have to be purchased in. And for example, the tooling. Innovation's great when it comes to paper pulp that you might want to consider for a pack, but the tooling costs for that can be really, really expensive. And then you've got to consider other things like sampling, getting a white sample done. Will a supplier give you a free white sample? Generally, most of them will. But some of them might say, well, no, we're going to charge you for sampling, and certainly we'll charge you for full sampling. Some suppliers won't. You've got to consider your lead times. You've got to consider your quality control. How is it going to be made sure that whatever you're coming out of the box, you look at it and go, well, that's not what I was expecting at all. And what can I do to limit my risk exposure? What do I do if something goes wrong? Where do I start with the supplier? If they're based in the Far East and I'm dealing with them directly, do I have any recourse? Am I able to correct something that goes wrong? And how much is that supplier going to be prepared to step out and make sure that they can fix something that might have been inadvertently gone wrong? Let's continue with manufacturing in different areas. Do I have carbon footprint considerations? Should I be manufacturing in the EU? Should I be manufacturing in the Far East in China or somewhere else? Do I need to be flexible with my supplier in asking for increased production due to a surge in demand for seasonal packs, for example? What happens if I order 2 years of packs? Where am I going to store them? I haven't to warehouse them. Can my supplier offer storage? And finally, of course, which is a massive thing nowadays, is corporate and social responsibility considerations. How do I know that what is happening in the supply chain matches the aspirations that I have, that I'm telling my clients, in terms of the way that I set up my company and the mission statement I have to be a responsible manufacturer, to be a responsible producer of fragrances that I know are going to apply to the criteria that I set for my own CSR considerations. So there is so much to consider. And these are the questions that you must be asking a supplier, because they need to be able to answer these to give you the satisfaction that you need, that if you select a supplier like this, they can manage all of this for you. And essentially all you're doing is giving them a design and saying, make it for me, deliver it on time, make it great, and make it to the fact that I know that that's what I'm going to spend. You're not going to come in with any additional costs afterwards. That's all the manufacturing process. Let's go back there. Let's start with the design phase considerations. Elby, why don't you outline for us the design process and why something that IPL looks at specifically, why design for manufacture is such a good outlook to start with.
Thanks, Jason. Yes, I think you summed it up. So IPL has always prided itself in the fact that our design and new product development teams understand, perhaps slightly more than the average design agency, the rigors of manufacturing, the ins and outs of decisions made in materials, in processes, and just like Jason mentioned, the whole cumbersome part of manufacturing and supply. So we always, like anybody should, start with engaging the client and discussing a brief, really getting to know the client, getting to know the product, and what specifics they would like or not like to for us to focus on. it always starts with a discussion around a budget, quality expectations, of course, specifics on perhaps timing, the volumes of the packs, how many in quantity. And then we can start breaking down what the options would be material-wise. Are we talking about 10 wooden boxes or 1,000 cardboard boxes? What are the options as far as material supplied? Where does it come from? Can it be certified? All those sort of considerations go into a brief discussion. Once we set that down, everybody's sort of happy that the parameters of the brief have been met. We start an ideation process. So that could take the shape of some conceptual sketching that we then would like to engage a client with again, seeing if we're on the right track, seeing if our visuals, our aesthetic is going the right direction. And then we also have a chance internally to take that ideation and start discussing with our manufacturing teams and suppliers, cost implications, material availability, the sort of the background noise of manufacturing. Once we sort of have an agreed direction that the client is happy with and our manufacturing teams are considering, we can move on to a more developmental phase of the conceptual design. We usually like to take that into 3D modeling and then do photorealistic renders, which always, I think, is the easiest way to quickly represent a very realistic idea of what the client can expect to receive as a finished product. And that allows us then for a second round of interaction with the client just to finalize any specific details, and then to also, again, finalize cost implications and manufacturability. And after that second phase of conceptual development and rendering, the client would obviously then have a chance to engage. We would then take that into engineering development. That'll start with some mock-ups, playing around with sampling, like Jason spoke about white sampling, and then we have a chance to move on to a more realistic printed pre-production sample.
And that whole process, LB, how long generally does it take from start to finish?
Our design process, I'd say in the briefing stage, that goes hand in hand with the sales team, so that could take a couple of days, so not really specific to any time frame, but as much information as we can get out of that, so that gives a guideline to it. Our ideation phase usually could take a couple of weeks. I mean, a lot of this is also research, thinking about the client's needs, thinking about the actual brand, going into a bit of depth with competitors, the target market, the price, and that sort of thing. We'd really like to invest some time in looking and understanding the client and also the competitors and the market in general. So that could take a week or two. And then from then, structural design developments back and forth with the client. Again, always engaging, say, another couple of weeks. So we could get a real concise concept on the table for you to not just have a price estimate on, but also like a real representation of the visual. And I'd say under a month from engaging for the first time to delivering on a final design.
It goes back to what we were saying is, we often get clients who come to us and they have an idea and they say, oh, can you make it in a couple of weeks? If at all possible, the more time you can spend on getting a great concept ready and done and out the door, the more you can make a pack really, really special. As a rule of thumb, if you can give yourself 6 months, you can have a fantastic pack ready and in the market for it. That can be a little bit quicker if you're producing out of Eastern Europe, because anything coming out of the Far East is generally going to take between 4 and 6 weeks to ship. But by the time you get down to full sampling and there's been a back and forth and the artwork has been confirmed and the die lines have been created from the factory and then sent over for final approval, it does take time. So the longer you can give yourself, the better. So let's turn to another topic, which is balancing sustainable aspirations with brand identity. Sustainability is a massive buzzword, as is recyclability. When should it matter, LB? Should a client be caring about sustainability? If their clients care, should the company care? If the clients doesn't matter, should the company still care?
I think in the way it's going at the moment is everybody's caring more and more, which is, I think, a fabulous thing. The world needs that, and we are here to try and facilitate that to the best of our abilities. There are obviously many concerns, like Jason raised: price, availability of materials, tooling implications with volumes, But I would say we are working really hard on our innovation side at the moment to try and secure some sort of a sustainable option at each of the price points we target. So that could be as simple as removing unnecessary mixtures of materials and trying to solve a problem with a single material, or completely going the other way in a high end and getting the most luxurious sort of sustainable FSC source type materials that we can for woods and metals, and then also making sure that there's inherent second uses. It's easily disassembled. It's singular recycling streams. There are several ways of solving this, but I would say currently in the luxury market, people are becoming more and more aware. Clients are becoming more and more aware of what it is they're buying and where it comes from. So I think it's not something that we should underestimate or take lightly.
What sort of materials are useful for sustainable aspirations nowadays? What are you seeing that's both clever and practical for manufacturing purposes as well?
I think we are looking at several things, interesting paper foams, thermoform paper pulps, that sort of thing is becoming more and more popular. But
you carry on talking, I've got a few examples I'll share as we go. Compressed paper pulp, there's some compressed cork, you can see that.
Yeah, okay, I have some options I can show as well. The idea with these being replacement of plastic packaging.
Silicon leather. Carry on.
I don't think people should disregard the value of paper, of grey boards, or recycled mostly. Craft papers are naturally dyed. We are looking at things like soya inks, moving away from petroleum-based inks, water-based printing methods. These are all simple ways of ensuring a single recycling stream, where you can take a piece of cardboard packaging. For instance, I have a sample here we produced for whiskey that tried to get away from using magnets. Rare earth magnets are very popular in luxury packaging, but the mining process is quite intrusive and not very environmentally friendly. So we've come up with a couple of different solutions of making closures without magnets, and then also building pack structures that are completely made of one material. So for instance, the pack I have in my hand disassembles into a flat pack that's that can be a single material use. So that piece of packaging becomes in just a one material flat pack, fitments included. So that makes it, I mean, in my mind, if you're using water-soluble glues and pre-dyed or recycled papers, a great option. We also have more and more options in as much as fitments and even external packaging pieces with things like paper foams. We call it biofoam. It's made starch-based. It's very similar to injection molding, which was also previously a bit more of a rudimentary process, but it has in recent years become much more accessible. Costs have gone down, and like you can see here, options have increased dramatically in as much as color choices and level of detail in molding. It is quite it's quite an attractive alternative to plastic at the moment. Having said that, there are certain cost implications. The tooling is still relatively expensive, so volumes need to be considered. There are limitations, obviously, to what the finish can be on things like starch-based paper molding. It isn't plastic, but can serve the function.
So the enthusiasm for sustainability needs to be mixed with a healthy dose of practicality. We have a team that is dedicated for this in this regard when they do some pretty cool stuff, but it always has to be based around the fact that what can you actually make that's already available in the market, but that can be used from a commercial aspirations. And that touches on the practical innovation of what we were going to talk about. I know we're running out of time, so I'll talk very, very briefly. VAPs, otherwise known as value-added packs, also known as gifting, for a brand owner, presents a unique opportunity to make the most of secondary packaging to sell a brand. The reason being that a larger pack equals more shelf presence. So more shelf presence gives you more opportunity to get a visualization across to the potential buyer. Gifting can provide opportunities for greater margins And it's also a route to new customers, because obviously it makes sense. You give somebody who's never tried your product before a gift, there's more likelihood that you're going to engage them and create a loyal brand user out of it. And VAPs also offer secondary use possibilities. So lastly today, COVID. How has it affected retail, and how it will continue to do so for a long time? Well, due to advancing technology, the internet's domination of every aspect of our lives, and the inevitable rise of e-commerce, traditional retail is dying a slow and very painful death. It has been for quite a while, and it's tragic to watch how fashion outlet after fashion outlet has closed down. COVID has only exacerbated the crisis to the point at which the retail experience, actually going into a store, has for some become a rarity. Now, this has meant that brand owners have had to rethink the way they sell their product. For the fragrance industry, I'm not sure the effect has been felt quite so keenly yet, but I would argue that the considerations should be the same, which are to continue to find ways to recreate the wonder of the retail buying experience in a home environment. Secondary packaging can be a key part of making that a success, because a beautiful box can add to the magic of the product, the wonder of the reveal. It can enhance perceived value of the product, and then also secure a lifetime of brand loyalty. That is it from us for today, guys. I hope you found this information useful, and please feel free to ping over any questions that we have. I see there's one coming from Danilo, who says, I own a small business and my problem is packaging has always been minimum quantities. When I launch a new range, I cannot risk to buy 5,000 to 10,000 boxes that would completely take my stockroom. Danilo, you're not alone. It's a question and a challenge that we get faced by small fragrance owners time and time again. I would go back to what we spoke about earlier, which is there are suppliers that you can turn to who do smaller runs. In Eastern Europe in particular, we have factories that can do runs into the few hundreds. And there are suppliers that can store stuff for you. The challenge that you will have on that is to probably then come up with your own designs, because to ask a supplier to allocate design resources for what is essentially a small project value is often something that they're not willing to do, because it just simply doesn't make financial or practical sense to do so. So there are ways that you can do it, and try and find a supplier if you can convince them that you are a growing fragrance, you're going places, and that you may be prepared to negotiate on your payment terms, for example. That could also be something that could be of interest to a supplier. I don't see any more questions, and we have taken a lot of time. So I'm going to say thank you to Linda and the Fragrance Foundation once again for giving us the time to present. And with that, it's back to you.
Well, thank you. I've learned so much. I think that was extremely interesting. And I
felt like I was gabbling at times, but I realized we had quite a lot to get through. I apologize.
I think it's fantastic, because I think actually we all take packaging for granted, and there actually is so much into it. And we're getting some nice messages from people that also feel the same way. So it's really exciting. For those of you watching, I hope you do get in touch with Jason and LB. They're really here to help you. And anything that we can do for you at the Fragrance Foundation, please do get in touch.